was 1 a.m. in June. Ethan was sitting at home, playing on the computer. He was alone, as his parents had gone to the country. Ethan lived in an apartment on the 8th floor. He was playing quietly when he suddenly heard a clear knock on the window. Maybe I imagined it, he thought. But a second later, there was a second knock. Ethan jumped, stood up, and went to the window. There was no one outside. He turned back to the computer and froze in horror. On the screen, he saw himself hanging from a rope, his body swaying lifelessly in time with some invisible winds. Ethan's heart was racing, and his breathing was labored. He grabbed his phone, intending to call his parents or the police, but the phone screen showed an empty room. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He slowly turned around, and in the reflection of the mirror, he saw that his room was empty, and his double was sitting on the bed, smiling softly. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. The doppelganger didn't respond. He simply raised his hand and pointed at the door. Against his will, Ethan felt his legs moving towards the exit. When he opened the door, the hallway was endlessly long. The walls seemed to be made of glass, and every door behind him reflected his hanging body on a rope. Ethan tried to run to the neighbor's apartment, but every apartment was empty. With each passing second, the reflection on the walls became more alive, and his double was now following him, repeating his every move. The knocking on the window resumed. This time, it was not from the outside, but from within the apartment. Ethan turned around, and there was a doppelganger, clutching a rope just like the one on the screen. Ethan realized this wasn't a dream, and it wasn't a computer game. He rushed to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. The doppelganger froze, and the smile disappeared. But as Ethan took a step to attack, the reflection on the wall came to life, moving independently, clinging to Ethan as if it were pulling him into the screen. Ethan realized a terrible thing. While he was looking at the screen, the doppelganger could control the reality around him. He closed his eyes, hoping that everything would disappear. But all he could hear was the sound of the rope and the quiet laughter. In a panic, he rushed to the window, broke it, and jumped onto the fire escape. The wind was cold, but there was no sign of his doppelganger. Ethan was breathing heavily, exhausted. But when he looked back into the apartment through the broken window, he saw that the computer screen was back on, and his double was hanging from the rope again, smiling into the void. Knowing that Ethan was still there on the balcony, watching, Ethan realized that, as long as he was alive, his double would not die. And when he closed his eyes, who knew what would happen to him then? Alex sat at the table in his room. It was summer, 1 in the morning, and the only sound was the gentle hum of the fan. He was leafing through an old diary he'd found in the attic, belonging to someone who had lived there 100 years ago. The pages were yellowed, the ink was almost worn away, but in some places the letters seemed to move when you looked at them for too long. Suddenly, he noticed a note carefully tucked between the pages. "If you read this in the dark, the shadow will find you." Alex chuckled, thinking it was just an old warning. But as he looked up from the diary, the room suddenly darkened. The light above the table flickered twice, and an inky black silhouette stretched across the window, despite the moon shining outside. Alex tried to laugh, but felt a chill run down his spine. He looked around, but the room was empty. Then the diary itself opened to a new page. The ink began to form new words right before his eyes. "You saw me. I'm nearby." Knock. Something hit the wall behind him. Alex froze. He listened and realized the sounds were coming from the dim mirror reflecting his room. And suddenly, the reflection didn't match his position. It stood behind me and slowly raised its hand, as if inviting. Alex tossed the diary onto the table and tried to step away, but a faint creak echoed from the shadows, as if someone was walking across the floor in shoes that shouldn't be there. He listened. The footsteps are slowly approaching him, but when he turns around, the room is empty. Strange dark spots began to appear on the walls, like figures of people reaching out to him. He touched one of the spots, and the cold surface almost stuck to his fingers, as if it were not part of the wall but a living shadow. Alex tried to throw the diary into the corner of the room, but when he got there, the diary was gone. It was back on the table, open to the same page that read, "You can't leave me." At that moment, the computer in the room turned on. Even though it had been turned off, the screen showed nothing but a black void, and from it slowly emerged a shadow resembling his silhouette, with a distorted face and no eyes. Alex realized that the diary had summoned his doppelganger, the shadow, who could now manifest in reality. Alex rushed to the door to leave, but the apartment seemed longer than before. The door that had previously led to the hallway now stretched endlessly. With each passing second, the shadow's footsteps grew closer, and the whispers grew louder. "You're reading. You're watching. I'm here." He grabbed the lamp and turned on the flashlight on his phone. But the shadow didn't disappear. It moved independently of the light, mimicking his every movement, only distorted, horrifying. Alex closed his eyes, hoping that it would all end. When he opened them, the room was empty, the diary was gone, and the computer was turned off. He thought that it had all been a nightmare, but a new message appeared on the mirror in blood red ink. "Next time, I'll be inside you," he recalled, but the mirror no longer reflected his face, but a blank, dark hole where his eyes should have been. Alex realized a terrible thing. The shadow had been waiting for him, and now it would never leave.